Thanks all for coming in. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. I know plenty of you have talked with us about the GC survey that we did earlier in the year, and plenty of you will have read it. Today we're going to explore it a bit deeper, but this is what we're really talking about today, cranking up your content marketing, what general counsels want. I'm going to lead us off here with a quote from one of the general counsels that responded to our survey earlier on in the year. I think this is a sentiment that if you've ever been to another legal marketing conference like the LMA or the PM Forum or PSMG, you'll recognise this sentiment. Firms need to stop thinking about general counsels and chief legal officers as lawyers and instead approach them as legally minded business owners. And many firms just aren't there yet. That's from a chief legal officer at a US cloud services firm. So as I say, I think you'll recognise the sentiment if you've been at any other legal marketing conferences. It's something that client panels and client interviews turn up quite a lot, where general counsels are expecting and they're hoping for their suppliers to help them in their careers and approach them as legally minded business owners and provide that value that's going to really help them within their firms. So that's what we're talking about. How can you do that? How is it actually done? How can firms approach them as legally minded business owners? A bit about me, I'm Sam. I'm not from here. I'm from here. I work with these fantastic people at Passle, and we conducted this survey with our research partners earlier on this year, and we asked 100 general counsel, how can we do this? How can we approach them as legally minded business owners? A bit of a breakdown on the data before we jump into the presentation. Who did we actually interview, and what was the makeup of that data? So we interviewed 100 general counsels, as I said. Most of them were in this kind of 500 range, but all of them were above the 10 million in annual revenue. There was a 50-50 split between the UK and the US, and there's actually remarkably little variation between the two regions. So the data from this is relevant to both, and we would expect this actually to be relevant across a few other regions as well, Europe, EMEA, and probably Oceania as well. About who, just to break down those industries then, so we've the huge representation of different industries here. So if your clients are mostly technology, TMT, if you're retail or public sector or oil and gas or healthcare and pharmaceutical or infrastructure, they were all represented here on the survey. And a big thank you to our research partner who, without whom this wouldn't have been possible at all. So Simon, right up the front, I can't recommend enough. So if you've got a research project and you want someone who's going to be very, very reliable and easy to deal with and turn up the data that's going to be most useful for you, I can't recommend enough knowing Simon. He's a very useful bloke to know. There's also a big thanks owed to this bloke too. This is Phil McGowan. He's the global director of communications at Reed Smith, and he's based in Washington, DC. Phil came to us almost a year ago and said, I'm having a real difficulty getting my firm to understand the value of doing thought leadership. I'm finding it really hard to explain to lawyers why they should write content and why they should care about putting their thought leadership into the market. And Phil was using a set of old research to explain why general counsel find thought leadership useful and what that means for the relationship between that general counsel and the suppliers. But that research was going out of date. And so Phil approached us and said, can you do anything? Can you give me anything that's going to help out? And that was the genesis behind the research that you're about to see. I think that's probably a good starting point to mention. None of the research you're going to see here today is revolutionary in the way that you're going to do your marketing. It will confirm a lot of things that you already know. There are going to be some surprises and some unexpected results from that survey. But by and large, what we're trying to do here is help you go back to your firms and advocate for best practice in thought leadership wherever you are. The data here is specifically designed to be presented to people who are not marketers, who are not technologists, and specifically designed to make sense to the business that you all work in. So we've broken this presentation down into three parts: how and why general counsel consume content, the best practices around content that we've discovered from the survey, and what they mean for your relationship with those clients and prospects that you're trying to win for your firm. We're going to start here with how and why general counsels consume content. There's two big misconceptions, I think, certainly that we had at Passle around general counsels and the way that they consume content. The first one was how much time GCs actually spend on doing so. So when we asked how many hours a week do they spend staying up to date, reading about industry news and developments, typically that was at least a day or more of a normal working week. 8 hours plus. You can see these three big chunks here. It's quite a phenomenal amount of time when you think about it. At least a full work day spent on staying up to date, on trying to be abreast of those developments and those best practice that's going to make the difference in their career. That final chunk there is quite staggering too, more than 16 hours a week. 14% of general counsel that we surveyed spend more than 16 hours a week, more than 2 days of their work week consuming content. So there's a huge amount of time spent trying to do this, and you can see how important it is to them. The second big misconception that I think we had at Passle particularly was that content is consumed in a place that looks like this. It's consumed in a deep focus where they're paying lots of attention to what you're providing, where they're taking notes, discussing with their colleagues, and they're really digesting what you're providing. We're certainly guilty of that at Passle. I know we've written white papers, and Simon, some of the research we were just talking about made its way into white papers where we expected people to know, after reading it once, everything that was in that paper, and we were expecting them to consume it with that focus in a place that looked like this. But that's just not the case, and that's not what we found when we asked general counsels what they're doing. Your clients and prospects are far more likely to be consuming your content in a place that looks like this. On the weekend, walking the dog, or like this, on the tube, on the way to work, or like this, waiting for the Tinder date who's late to arrive, or like this, in between meetings, trying to catch up between meeting clients, or between meeting business units, or like this, drinking the first cup of coffee of the day, desperately trying to wake up, or like this, where for a moment, as the kids have gone to bed, there's a bit of quiet to finish off the day. And that was a big misconception that we had. I think as a content marketing software, we like to think that people were consuming what our clients were producing in a really nice environment, and they were delivering their full focus to it. And that's not the case. It's in the margins of the day that those 8 hours plus are spent. They're not sitting down at their desk for 8 hours a day to consume your content. They're doing it mostly on the weekend. So of all the times when we asked the general counsels, when do you keep yourself up to date and when are you reading this content? And you can see the percentage of respondents by each answer. And almost 75% of GCs are consuming this on the weekend. And that was the top answer. That was the number one time that they were doing that. Weekdays after work were second. Lunchtimes between meetings, before work, on the commute, in downtime. And the last piece of that, the smallest chunk, less than 20%, during the working day at work in the office, focusing on what you're doing. So engagement happens. Engagement with content happens on their time, under their terms, and your content marketing needs to reflect that. Looks much more like this. So we also asked general counsels why they're consuming content. And I don't think any of these reasons will come as surprises to any of you. The top reason people were consuming content was to identify business opportunities. That links back to that quote that we saw first. Legally minded business owners. They're looking to generate thoughts and ideas, to support arguments, to find solutions to legal challenges, to keep up to date with legal issues, and finally, down the bottom there, to assess the suitability of an advisor as well. There's no clear, dominant, single reason that you can take back to your firm and say, we need to be producing this content because this is why they're reading it. But if you can produce a wide range of content that addresses these top challenges, then you'll be well on the way to achieving that advantage that we're going to come to later on when we look at the relationship between law firms, content, and the perceptions that your clients and prospects have of your firm. So just to sum up those points, general counsels typically spend more than 8 hours a week reading content, and that's often much, much more than that. Content's typically consumed by general counsel on their own time, in the margins of the days, at the weekend, at the cafe, before putting the kids to bed, in those margins of the day, in the small moments. General counsels have many different motivations for reading content, and you need to cater to those with a range of different content types. So to come back to our first question there, and just to answer that first piece of it, how can firms approach general counsels and chief legal officers as legally minded business owners? Engage your audience regularly on their terms. Like I said earlier, the data behind what we're looking at today isn't going to revolutionize what you know about content marketing. You probably know that this is what you should be doing. But if you have the data to take to your firm and say they're reading content a lot, they're reading content at times that we're not expecting, then you can cater for that and you can engage them on their terms. So the second part here, we're looking at content best practices. What type of content do general counsels prefer, and what content are they engaging with the most? So there's another big misconception that we had here, similar to the first, in that as a content marketing platform, I think we expected that the predominant type of content that lawyers would be reading would be blog posts, would be articles, would be the type of thought leadership that we see lots of law firms produce. And it would be mostly read content, it would be mostly text. And again, the survey produced an answer that we weren't quite expecting. So rather than being read content and blogs and articles, your content that is most engaged with, content that GCs prefer, is more likely to look like this: a podcast on a run or on a walk to work. It's a webinar with colleagues and with their peers explaining best practice. It might be a short video on a social media platform. It could be a meme. It's probably not whatever that is. But who knows? Maybe in the MarTech stream there'll be a few people talking about how to integrate virtual reality into your thought leadership. I don't know. It's probably not, though. When we talked to general counsels and we asked them what format they prefer, there was no single dominant content type that they preferred the most. Podcasts were the most consumed, webinars were second, but each of them were only 13 or 14% of the market, of what they were consuming. The implication of that is that if you're producing a single format content, if you're producing a podcast and you only publish it as a podcast, you're going to miss out on 86% of the readers or of the GCs that you could have engaged with that content. There's no single content format that's going to help you engage the whole market. What that means is that you then have to take that podcast, perhaps you record it by way of a webinar, you distribute it in a newsletter, you tweet it, that goes in an email alert. You then have that in a featured article or a video. There's website content displaying that podcast, and it goes out in your news item, and maybe there's a graphic that comes off the back of it. We have a philosophy at Passle that we call COPE, and it was given to us by someone, I can't remember who it was now, but COPE stands for Create Once, Publish Everywhere. And that's how you capture the most, I would say readers or listeners, that's how you capture the most attention from your content. That's how you engage with the clients and prospects that you want in the volume that you need to. We then asked General Counsel what are the qualities of good content. And there's no single dominant thing here either, but we feel like these are combinable, these are composable, these are very, very possible to include in the thought leadership that you produce. So include sources, have it produced and attributable to a legal expert, have it be actionable, and have it be timely, detailed, relevant, brief, and if you can, include media. None of those are mutually exclusive, so it's very much possible to include all of those in your content. There was a final quality that content had that General Counsel said they preferred. This is a question that we get asked quite a lot, and it's, is curation enough? Can we just curate the industry news and deliver that to our clients? Is that enough for content marketing? And 69% of General Counsels would disagree with that. 69% of General Counsels want you to go further. They need the insight and opinion of your legal experts. It's probably unsurprising when you think about what they're buying and what they're trying to do in their careers, but 69% would prefer that insight and opinion over industry summary. There's a theme that came out of the research that came again and again, but it came particularly when we asked General Counsels about website content and how they consume website content. And the theme was that your web content is your shop front. It's your store window. It's that thing that people are walking past every day and catching their eye. I don't think we fully appreciated at Passle how often or how much people are reviewing your web content. A few years ago, we would say it's not enough that you publish it on the website and then it languishes there and it disappears. You need to get it out into the world and publish it everywhere. But I don't think we quite appreciated just how much General Counsels are coming to your websites and trying to assess your subject matter expertise. So 95% of the General Counsel that we surveyed came to a supplier's website or assessed a supplier's website during the selection process of engaging a new firm. When you engaged a legal supplier, which of these best described your assessment? 40% reviewed the website fully. I don't know what fully means, but I would assume if you were talking to a lawyer, it meant a considerable amount. 54% partially reviewed it, and just under 5% didn't review it at all. So 95% of General Counsel are assessing your website and trying to determine whether you have the subject matter expertise that they need. And that doesn't just happen during the initial assessment process. That's not just a one-off gate where you need to jump over it. They're coming back. So existing legal service suppliers this time, 40% of the General Counsels were coming back weekly to look at your website. 12%, or I think it was 13%, are coming back daily, and between 30 and 40% coming monthly. When you total these three, it's a huge percentage of your clients and your prospects are coming back, walking past your shop front every day to assess your suitability. It's not just a once-off thing. And to come back to that theme of the shop front, if you have fresh thought leadership, if you've got fresh content there that's changing, because they're coming back daily or weekly, they can then see something that's new, that's going to catch their eye, make them want to consume a lovely, sunny, hot watermelon. And not something that's been stale, that's sat there for weeks and weeks and weeks, and that they've walked past day after day after day. So just to summarize those points then. Content should be published in multiple formats. It should be well-sourced, expert-written, actionable, relevant, and timely. And you can compose thought leadership including multiple of those. You don't need to focus on a single one. It should include insight and opinion, and it should be prominent and regularly updated. So to bring that into our question then, how can firms approach GCs and chief legal officers as legally minded business owners? Deliver helpful, fresh, and multi-format content. So coming into our last section now, we've heard a little bit about what GCs, why GCs consume content and how they're doing it. We've heard a little bit about what type of content they'll prefer. Now we're going to hear about the implications for the commercial relationship between suppliers and GCs, between law firms and their clients and prospects. This was it wasn't something that we expected to see. I think when we asked this question, we were expecting a much smaller percentage of the market to see content as a responsibility of the suppliers that they're working with. But when we ask this question, you'll notice there's something missing from this graph, and that's a percentage of people who didn't think it was a responsibility at all. So 40% of the General Counsel surveyed considered content a significant element of supplier responsibility. 40% considered it a reasonable element. 20% considered it a minor element, but there were no GCs that we surveyed that didn't see it as a responsibility at all. So just as they expect your lawyers to keep them informed, they expect your firm to keep them up to date. The natural next question from there is, how well do you think your suppliers and other firms are keeping the market up to date? And when we asked this question, only 1 in 12 of the General Counsel that we asked thought law firms were working hard enough to keep the market informed with timely, relevant content. 1 in 12. There's one orange light bulb there. That's good news for everyone in this room, because there's 11 out of 12 of those are a serious opportunity to do something that your competitors are not. We then went a little bit further and asked, what kind of preference would you have if a firm was demonstrating subject matter expertise? Would you prefer them over other firms? Would you be advancing them ahead of others in your engagement processes? 61% of General Counsel preferred firms that were demonstrating subject matter expertise. And you'll see here, very few, less than 10%, disagreed with that. So we had a lot of fence sitters that could go either way. So 61% might belie the true number underneath that. We went a step further and asked, would you work with a supplier if they didn't demonstrate subject matter expertise? And 48% of General Counsel would only work with firms that demonstrated subject matter expertise. And again, you've got a huge portion there sitting on the fence. So we just stop for a minute and think about that 48% number. So if you think about your marketing budget, your BD efforts, your PR as part of that, your advertising, anything you're doing on social, you can cut that in half if you're not demonstrating the subject expertise that your clients and prospects want to hear. 48% of General Counsels will not work with firms unless they're demonstrating subject matter expertise. On a more personal note, and on a sort of more relevant to individual lawyers note, coming back to Phil McGowan's main concern, how do I get my lawyers to understand the value of content marketing? The big picture is very good, but they want to win their own clients and advance their own careers as lawyers. 64% of GCs would seek out a lawyer by name if they read their content. And that's what that looks like. More likely asked to speak to a lawyer by name if I've read articles by them. 64%. 36% disagree. So if you're taking a figure back to your lawyers, or if you've got a particular person who you think has an excellent subject matter knowledge but just isn't engaging in any of the content marketing types that you're trying to get them engaged in, this is a great stat to be able to show. So just to sum up those implications then for law firms. Content is a supplier's responsibility. 100% of the GCs we surveyed said that, and that was a real surprise for us. Clients prefer and often require, 48% of clients require that suppliers are subject matter experts when they're engaging them. And content attributed directly to a lawyer gives that lawyer an advantage in winning work. So bringing that into our question, how can firms approach GCs and CLOs as legally minded business owners? You can show your firm the importance of content. Both these two first points that we've talked about are no good if you don't get the buy-in of your firm needed to make them happen. If it's an uphill battle for you to produce regular content that engages your audience on their terms, or to deliver that fresh, multi-format content that's going to engage enough people, it's going to be very difficult to have best practice in your thought leadership program. If you're able to take some of those stats that we've just showed you back into your firm and deliver them to the partners, senior marketing leaders, BD, individual lawyers, it's going to be much easier for you to push that best practice. So to finish off here, how can firms approach GCs and CLOs as legally minded business owners? Engage your audience regularly on their terms. Your content's much more likely to be consumed in a place that looks like this than looks in an office. The long white papers are very good because GCs need sources, they need to trust, they might want to dive deeper into what you're producing. But you can't count on your clients and prospects giving you their full focus of your content at all. So produce something that can get their interest and then lead them on. Secondly, deliver that helpful, fresh, multi-format content that those general counsels want. A white paper or a blog might not be the thing that the clients and prospects that you have in mind are actually consuming. It might be a social media video like this. And finally, show your firm the importance of content. Show your firm that content is that shop front, is that front window. Show them how important it is that general counsel are walking past every day and are able to see fresh, helpful subject matter expertise on those subjects that are most relevant to them. So I'm going to finish off with a quote. We started with one. As a major global business, I engage law firms in many countries. It would be helpful if they were able to proactively share updates that were timely and relevant to me and would certainly be something that would help them stand out. So I could have saved you half an hour and just put this one on after the second one, but we did all that research and we had to show you it. I think this sums it up nicely. This is from a president of legal at a petrochemical company based in London. And that's how firms can approach general counsel and chief legal officers as legally minded business owners. I'm Sam. I'll be having a beer later on if any of you want to chat about this. If you've got any ideas for things that we should be researching, then let us know. Phil came up to us at a conference similar to this and said, I'd really, really benefit from being able to know what general counsel want from content. And that's what made this research happen, along with the expertise of Simon. So thank you very, very much. If you'd like the full research, you can get it here. If you'd like to get the slides, you can get them there and take them back into your firm. I'll stick around for a second for any questions if you've got them. But otherwise, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for coming.